Welcome to the IT Matters Podcast, where we explore why IT matters and matters pertaining to IT. Here's your host, Aaron Bach.
Welcome to the show. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We've got another exciting episode on the IT Matters Podcast today. I'm joined by my co-host, Keith Hawkey. Keith, how are you doing today?
Wonderful. Right back at you, Aaron.
Yes, it's been I know it's been a busy time over the last couple weeks. Today on the podcast, we are lucky to have Kevin Hughes on the podcast. He is right now he's at Sharonview Federal Credit Union. He's the Vice President of IT Operations. Kevin has a long background we're going to get into today, but Keith and I, we know Kevin. We've talked to him a little bit before this, and we were talking about some of the things that we know our listeners like to hear and like to listen and learn about. And a couple of things we're going to address today that I'm excited to talk to Kevin about is getting IT and the business working together more and how you do that, strategies around it. And then also the buzzword digital transformation. What does that mean? Everyone says it. Gartner loves it. I think Google loves it at this point. So we will talk a lot about that today. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
We are very excited as well. I guess, Kevin, let's start off with, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, personal, professional, everything in between that you want them to know.
Sure. So I've been obviously in the IT industry for a little over 25 years at this point, starting at the ground level of break fix and working up to where I am today. So always enjoyed IT. I've always enjoyed troubleshooting, problem solving, all the things that are the fun and games of IT, right? So that's my work life. I live in Pineville, North Carolina, married with my menagerie of household animals, which I'll just cap off at 2 dogs at the moment, and then some cats, and we'll leave it at that. But as far as personally, I enjoy music. I love music. I've always been had a passion for music, as well as Keith pointed out earlier, the Charlotte FC scarf behind me. I do enjoy our new MLS soccer team here in town, and have enjoyed the games this year. So it's been a pleasure to attend those.
What's your favorite kind of music?
I'm a rock guy at heart, so I tend to be all over the place as far as what I like musically, but I like just about anything. And it's my running joke is I'm a bit schizophrenic in my music, because you may catch me listening to hard rock 1 minute, classic the next. It could be jazz or then reggae or who knows. It's just all over the place. But at my heart and soul, it's usually rock based.
Very cool. Yeah, you should check out. There's a new show on Netflix called The Playlist that I'm watching right now, and it's kind of about the starting and the founding of Spotify, from CDs to when there was a lot of torrent-based downloading that got a lot of heat for being illegal, and then how Spotify was formed. I think you'd find it pretty interesting. So, Kevin, you mentioned where you're at today, how you got there, your experience. You have a unique kind of background as far as you actually are one of the few people that I think I've met where you were at an organization, you left for a couple different gigs, and then about 8 to 9 years later, you actually joined back at an organization in a higher role, et cetera. I know a lot of people, especially in this day and age, I think they call it boomerangs, depending on who you're talking to, but maybe describe that. Was it weird coming back? Why did you go back? Did you learn? Did you feel like you learned a lot coming back into an organization you were previously?
No, absolutely. So I did. I worked for Sharonview previously as an engineer, basically supporting the organization in that engineering type role. I had an opportunity that came along that just gave me a much broader potential for knowledge and than I was going to get within Sharonview. And it was not something I was looking for, but just sort of fell in my lap. And it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. In hindsight, it was probably the best career move I could have made. As I left, I went into this new role. It started off in a semi-managerial role, ended up progressing then into more of a leadership type role. That was with a smaller boutique consulting firm here in Charlotte. That eventually got bought out by a much larger NTT Data organization that then certainly changed my trajectory and gave me a lot more opportunity from a leadership role that then enabled me to really expand my skill set, and gave me exposure to a lot of mentors, a lot of people that helped my career kind of continue to progress. In the process, I had always kept ties with some of the people I worked with at Sharonview. Credit unions are a wonderful organization. For those that aren't familiar with them, it's very much a family type environment, and you tend not to lose contact with those folks. So I had always maintained a relationship over the years with several people within Sharonview, and there was an opportunity that came up for a role in leadership within the IT department back at Sharonview again. This provided me an opportunity to get back into working for an organization that I was familiar with. I absolutely loved working for, to get back into loosely doing something more than just IT stuff, because you do with a credit union, it is nonprofit. You are having an impact on the community. So you're trying to improve members' lives. You're trying to provide benefits and opportunities for them as well. So it did allow me to get back into that venue again, which I always did enjoy in the past. Plus, it gave me an opportunity to work with some people that I was very familiar with. I knew what a great team they had. A number of the folks that were there when I worked there were still there. I had an opportunity to work with them again, and it's been fantastic to jump back into to the credit union ride again, and kind of really just continue to see this organization grow and expand.
And I think for some of the listeners out there, I mean, I think we all have seen or know what a credit union is in theory, what it does. Maybe help our listeners understand from a technology perspective, what makes a credit union maybe unique from either like a local bank, or maybe it's not unique, right? And explain that. And then what are some of the technology challenges that, I would say a smaller, more regional financial institution like Sharonview deals with, that are challenges that you face every day?
Sure. I think from a technology standpoint, there's not a lot of difference with the credit unions. We have the same opportunities, I think, as your banks. Where that comes in more to play is what you touched on as far as what are some of the challenges. So with credit unions, basically you're not for profit. So your bottom lines are always going back to your members. So anything we make, we're going and redistributing back out, either with lower interest rates, higher interest rates, loans versus deposits, that type of approach. But with that, of course, it's very budget conscious. So making sure that every dollar we spend is an intelligent dollar spent, and does it make sense to push this technology? Does it make sense to implement this security measure, whatever the case may be? That's always a conversation that we have, is to make sure we're spending our members' money in the best possible place. So, I think I look back at credit unions in the past versus kind of where we are today, and it certainly is I think now more of a focus on realizing we need to be closer. We're certainly never going to be a bleeding edge technology-wise, but we do need to be closer to that, especially in the security realm. In today's day and age, you can't turn the TV on without hearing about some type of a breach or some kind of security incident. So it is always first and foremost in our mind, hey, how can we protect ourselves, our members' data more efficiently?
Going back to transitioning from the engineering side of the business to more of a leadership role, you said that you had some mentors earlier in your career, perhaps at Sharonview, perhaps at some other places, that influenced you and probably had some insights that helped you along the way with this transition. I guess, could you talk a little bit about what some of that advice or insight was? What has helped you make a transition into where you're half one foot in the technology side, one foot in the leadership side, and why that's important today?
Sure. So I think we saw, probably over the last 10 years, we've seen a bit of a shift in leadership. In the past, it was very much I'm your leader, you do what I say, that's it, I don't care, end of story. And it's shifted more into, there's a quote that I love, people don't care about what you know until they know you care. And It's caring about your people, making sure that you're taking care of those folks. How are you growing your people as well? That was something that was kind of instilled early on by a mentor, and something I still look at today is how do we find what is the best trajectory for folks? And we're always trying to prepare people for that next step. You always hope it's within your own organization, but even if it's not, I want to make sure they're as prepared as possible for that next role. So I think from that perspective, it's how do you develop people? How do you keep them engaged? How do you, I think the technology and the engineering side of the house is somewhat easy. That's training. And most folks in IT are there because they enjoy technology to begin with. So they're going to kind of drive for that. I think from a leadership perspective, our challenges are more of how do you get them to that next level? What is it that they're looking for? How do you pull out of them where their passions are and make sure people are working in the direction of their passions, because that's always where they're going to succeed.
Has that been easy for you? I guess if you think of your entire IT staff and in those that have a plan and want to ascend up to more of a business role that's a little bit half and half, do you find, are there questions that you ask during an interview process to see that that's a path that they want to go down? Are there assessments that you do along the way? I guess, how do you engage each individual to figure out where they want to go and what they want to do?
Sure. I think for the most part, what you've got to do is you let them drive the conversation, but you give them a little bit of freedom. You provide a little bit of a nudge to kind of get started, but understand that. And it can be simply as easy as, hey, Keith, what's your passion? What is it that you get out of bed for every day? What makes you get out of bed? Chocolate. All right. So let's talk about chocolate. Maybe we need to look at a chocolatier type of a role for you. But really understanding, where their passions lie. You ask some of those leading questions, but really is letting them discover it. And I think that's always the challenge is you don't want to lead them necessarily to an answer, but you want to give them enough to start talking and start thinking about, I've never really thought about it. What is it I want to do? We had 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, even the standard interview question was, where do you want to be in 5 years? It's well worn and not used a whole lot anymore, and rightly so. But I think it's asked a little differently. And I think that's where you're still looking for the same type of an answer with, hey, tell me about your passions. What are the things you enjoy doing? And conversely, what are the things you don't enjoy doing? What are the things that you really don't like? Because if you don't like certain things, then, hey, this may not be a role for you, and we may not want to look at going down that road. So really, it's just understanding where people's passions lie.
I think that interview question died also with the question of what's your spirit animal that I feel like used to get asked in interview questions. Maybe it still does, but I haven't heard that one in a long time. So
I think we've used variants of that before, but
yeah, I think so. Well, and so Kevin, actually kind of related to what Keith just asked you, but sort of in a different way of asking it, right? So you just said during an interview process, you kind of not lead them, but you help understand, well, what do they want to do? One thing that's curious to me from our conversations previous to this is that, IT has a wide range of positions ranging from super heavy developers, which the stereotype is that they're in dark rooms with 90 screens and they're, barely eating and whatever. There's that all the way to the, help desk that has to be forward facing, the IT manager. But I think there are people who are very good at IT, if you will, the skill set that maybe would not be that interested initially or do not like having to go converse and figure out the business. They want to do IT. But I know your big passion is getting people to understand the business more, understand how do we support them, because at the end of the day, they are our customer. So I'm curious, when you have someone who maybe isn't good at that, what are some ways to coach them to get better at it and some ways to kind of help them understand this is why we do it, because it's going to make you a better blank developer, DBA, et cetera?
Sure. No, I think so. Part of that is, again, understanding the individual. And in some cases, it's okay. You may have some folks that really are are best designed for that backroom type role. And that's perfectly okay. They may have no desire to go outside. You can stretch them a little bit, but if you start talking about putting them out, talking to other leaders, talking to business people, they're visibly shaking at the thought of this. So, that may be too much of a stretch. But I think on the other side of that is you do have folks who are, you kind of described the stereotypical IT person, right? We don't communicate well. We're all introverts. We hide away in a dark room in a closet somewhere and our 20 monitors in front of us. But I think that is changing a lot as technology changes, as well as the opportunities are changing. And that's where we have really looked at, I've tried to kind of push people, is to say, okay, you have a little more of the capability to have interactive conversations with folks. And you're okay with it, right? You understand it. You're comfortable having those. So then continuing to talk to them and push them through of, okay, in those passion conversations, maybe you find out that an individual, numbers have always kind of fascinated me. Oh, okay. Hey, you know what? Maybe we'll get you interacting a little bit with accounting, understand kind of what their job is, what their role is, kind of, again, nudging, trying not to be a full-on push, but just nudging folks into areas of where their passions lie, and then stretching them a little bit. Okay, spend a little bit of time, understand, what does month-end closing mean? What are they looking at when it comes to that time? What are their challenges for that? And then, okay, you have a technology background, then how do you take that with the business knowledge that you're understanding that of their business now, and how do we marry those two together and provide solutions for them that help them along?
And that's great. That's actually a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about next, is combating shadow IT and the importance of developing IT people that are integrated in the different departments that often want to go their own way and onboard their own tools and think it doesn't have any relevance to the IT department because they don't have to manage it, or they don't need the IT department to install it on their computer. You must have a sort of success story around developing someone to be a business technologist. Maybe there's a better title for it. But do you have any examples of maybe accounting or other areas where you've had a successful, implant might not be the best word, but someone that's interfacing with the different departments?
Yeah, no, of course. Actually, that's perfect. We did, and we've been kind of on this journey for about 5 years now that I've been at Sharonview. And we had an engineer on the team who had a consumer lending background and really was coming into IT, I think initially as more of a Q&A type role. But as we started talking about it, we looked at the opportunities, and this was an individual who had a tremendous knowledge in the consumer lending platform. And we started kind of at that point having conversations around, okay, how do we take this now, rather than just saying this is somebody in IT, let's understand the business. They had a system that was installed very much kind of as you described, that was a shadow IT installed system. A vendor, of course, sold a cloud platform. You don't even need IT for this. It's perfect. It's fantastic.
Said every vendor ever.
Exactly, right? That's always the first red flag. You don't need IT? Uh-oh, we're going to need IT. But I think, we saw some opportunities within the system that, hey, we can take an IT approach, but also understand the business needs. And then how do we put these together? So we started introducing things like change management into their processes that in the past, without an IT background, they're not familiar with, which is why things would, any changes would get implemented, things would break. Systems were dissimilar, nothing reacted the way they thought. We took an approach of saying, hey, let's implement some of these IT methodologies into this, bringing the business aspect in as well to understand, all right, what are your challenges? What are some of the big issues that you've got? And we realized, hey, this started working phenomenally. We had a tremendous response from the business. We started to see improvements in processes on the business side of the house as well. And so we really kind of took this then as that was sort of a prototype, and started then from there, because that was such a success, moving on and looking at doing that within other departments.
And on the flip side of that, we ask a lot of times of people who are in different parts of IT or who have or somehow integrated with IT. We a lot of times will ask, what is the biggest mistake? I would venture to guess one of your mistakes that you would see with someone in IT and the management is that by not involving the business, it's a huge mistake, and not involving IT is a huge mistake. I guess maybe speak to that, like what happens when you don't involve the business or when you don't get the opinions of IT, like when they don't really work together well, what do you see? And I'm sure you've seen it with consulting and in your past.
Yeah, I think you guys called it out earlier. It's shadow IT. At the end of the day, that's what the end result is. If the business is not getting involvement from IT and getting the technology that they need, they're going to go find it on their own. And if they're going out and finding it on their own and not involving IT, again, we have no input into it. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever the system is, we can't help. They're on their own of now having to support this system, doing things that they're not normally used to doing. And at the end of the day, it just causes that rift to almost continue to grow between the IT department business. I think in the past, that was an acceptable model for IT. Hey, here's your technology. We've given it to you. Take it and go do your job. The model that we're really trying to go after now is more of, hey, what do you need to do your job? And then understanding from that, okay, here's the technology that we think we can provide, making it that partnership to provide technology that they need, but they're giving that information back of what the business needs and what are their challenges.
Just to make sure that everyone understands and is on the same page, when you say shadow IT, because we've referenced it twice now, and there might be folks out there who have different variations of what that is, what do you consider is shadow IT? Like, how would you define that? What is it? And I'm sure you're laughing because it's a million things, but
it is. It's another one of the buzzwords that means something different to everybody else, right?
It means a ghost is running your IT. That's what it is. No, I'm just kidding.
Actually, you're not too far off. It's really any type of IT operation that is functioning within your organization that is outside of IT. So if you have applications that are being maintained outside of IT's view, if you've got, whether it's administration, any of those type of support activities outside of IT, that becomes sort of a shadow IT, and you lose the benefit of the technology knowledge, methodologies, all of that framework that you have built up within your IT department. You've now got people doing things that they're not well versed at, and eventually will cause something to implode. It may not be today or tomorrow, but eventually things are going to get so bad it's just not going to work out well.
Yep, that makes sense. And I know we're going to go to digital transformation, but a quick funny story. I used to audit at a Big Four accounting firm, and I would come in and do the like SDLC where they did a implementation of a large ERP. And I remember one of the largest issues we dealt with almost every time was like, did you have IT look at this? Did you have IT test this? Did you have IT even vet it? Oh, well, no, it's really an accounting or it's a finance or it's not really their thing. It's just something we use. It's like, that is every IT department's worst nightmare. So it's been happening this is 10, 12 years ago. So it's been happening for forever, as long as you could basically download something or do something on your own. So I think all organizations struggle with it to some extent. Some have it under control better than others, but there's a balance between not limiting people too much and making sure that they follow like the best organizational practices. And I think it's just a tough balance to kind of stay in.
And it's communication. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to oversimplify it, it's communication. And as long as you guys, if you have that communication back and forth between the business and IT, then you can have those conversations to understand needs. There may be security implications that the IT department has that the business never would have thought about.
Right.
Any number of things. But I think as long as you guys are communicating and these things don't happen in a vacuum, I think it solves that problem.
That is leading into a great conversation around digital transformation, which is another one of these buzz phrases. Here at IT Matters, we like to cut through the buzzwords and just get to what they mean with their meaningful descriptions as much as possible. And earlier, Kevin, I remember you alluding to with how budget conscious credit unions are. The idea of being an early adopter in the technology cycle doesn't fit your business model. For the most part, you want the early adopters, whoever's going to do this work, to ride the technology trend, or you want to make sure it's not a phase. And once you start to see results, then you guys can take a harder look at, does this technology make sense for us? Does it improve our bottom line? Does it add value to our employees? It sounds like cybersecurity. Perhaps you have to think of that category in a little bit of a different way, since the consequences are more dramatic than a 2% increase in efficiency or something like that. But I guess, could you describe what digital transformation means to you, what it means to Sharonview, how you've thought about bringing this about?
Sure. And I think, honestly, it ties back even to our previous conversation as well about how we're integrating with the businesses. At the end of the day, for us, digital transformation is really driving efficiency. How can we drive innovation to improve efficiency, make it sustainable using technology? At a very simplistic definition of digital transformation, that's the way we're looking at it. So, the only way you can drive efficiency is you have to understand what the business needs. You can't improve what you don't know. So there's no way you can go into this and say, hey, we're gonna drive this digital transformation from an organizational perspective, but we don't know what the business needs. So that's where our involvement and our ties into the business and understanding needs there. How do we do that? So it's process improvements. How can we take, once we've dealt with a particular business unit, understanding some of their challenges. We've got some archaic processes. We have some things that I think, like a lot of organizations, we fall victim to. Well, this is the way we've always done it. One of the pros and cons to being a great organization to work for is you tend to have people that work for you for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, which is fantastic. You love that longevity and people's passion for your organization. But with that, you can also fall into that pitfall of, well, this is the way we've always done it. So I never thought about it. Why should we do something different? And that's where now, kind of with IT getting involved, we're getting into some of these processes and understanding, wait a minute, hey, I think we can solve this with technology. Maybe we don't necessarily need wet signatures everywhere. We don't have to ferry documents back and forth all over the place. We can start looking at electronic signatures and do things in a more efficient way. Any opportunity we have to programmatically solve an issue, let's take that approach. Of course, any solution that we really dive into, it's got to be sustainable too, right? It's not something that we can just jump in and, all right, let's solve this today. That doesn't really fit that digital transformation model. It's okay, this is sustainable long term with whatever our process improvement is with technology.
Yeah, it's certainly, as you were saying, it's far more than turning paper forms into bits and bytes. It's a holistic approach, utilizing those business technologists that you help develop. It all forms a picture that digital transformation can help illustrate. What do you have an example that you have undergone, recently, of a digital transformation that's been impactful for Sharonview? What has been one of the more impactful transformations that you have led recently?
So we've had a few, and again, I think with this, and it's part of the challenge of defining digital transformation, is it really can be across the board, and it could be as simplistic, like you said, as going to getting rid of wet signatures and getting documents into electronic management systems, things like that, or it can be more systematic. And I think that's what we're trying to look at as well. I'm going to take the long way around to answer your question, so bear with me for a minute. But I think in the past, what IT has done historically is we have those ad hoc projects, right? We jump in, we take care of, hey, this came up as a project, we do this, then we do that. There's no real methodology behind anything, and it's just all over the place. Then it's gotten to where we were a little more organized. We had a little more of a strategy from our IT department of, hey, these are the things that we want to do strategically. And then the next step, which is kind of where we are now, is understanding from the business, okay, what does the business need? This is no longer just an IT project. This is more of a business related project. And that's kind of our next step in the journey. So with that, we've looked at, we spent a lot of time building some framework around our cloud vision. What do we keep on-prem? What do we put in the cloud? What makes sense? And of course, that's a big discussion. That's everything from dollars and cents to security. You're talking hardware, all the way down to having financial discussions of that changes your whole financial perspective of OpEx versus CapEx, and what those challenges are. But I think for us, we have migrated some systems, and probably more specifically our core banking system to a cloud based system that really alleviated a lot of pain points for a lot of the organization, not just IT. So it's enabled us to alleviate some of the challenges with hardware maintenance, with dealing with upgrades and after hours upgrades and all of those fun things that we love to do in IT. But it's also allowed us organizationally to move quicker. So if there's things that we want to do, now that we're not having to manage the back end system so much, we're able to react quicker to business needs. And we can provide those solutions much quicker today than we could before when we owned the system and a lot of the administration on the back end. So that's probably, I would say, one of our bigger wins here recently is that migration really to the cloud, and understanding where that solution provided more benefits than just an IT benefit. It was an organizational benefit.
Yeah, and I think for all the listeners, we've talked about this with previous guests, but the fact that it can be, cloud seems to be coming up, more and more, because SaaS, platform as a service, moving into a hyperscaler cloud, private cloud, et cetera. A lot of people are trying to get out of the data center and manage it themselves. And I think too many times that gets kind of coincided with digital transformation. That can be a part of it, but there's usually got to be a reason behind it. So I love that you talked about how there's a why behind it. This is what it's helping us do to focus on blank better. And so I would also kind of ask you, look ahead. So look 5, 10, whatever, how many years ahead. I'm curious your perspective on, let's just call it rural financial institutions, regional banks, credit unions, other types of financial institutions that are kind of chain-based, sort of like you guys are. What are some of the trends that you think you're going to see that people need to be watching out for? What are some of the concerns you have in IT over the next couple of years? Just talk about like the next 5 to 10 years and what you expect to see in the credit union and rural bank space.
Sure. I think, really, and this is a reflection of, I think, changes in society, but it of course goes back to credit union and the business that we deliver, but is our ever increasing need for everything immediately. It used to be acceptable. Hey, if I need something, it's okay if this is a day, or you know what, if it's a week, that's okay. That's fine. No problem. Now it's, if you have to wait 5 minutes, people are complaining sometimes, right? And that's where we're seeing deliverables. And I think there's going to be a need for continue to prove efficiencies. That's where I think the digital transformation from the aspect that we're talking about will continue to be a hot topic and a hot button of how can we deliver new products as quickly as possible, more efficiently, as things change and the economy changes and we need to be, in those cases, reactive. How do we make those changes and how do we deliver those services? The pandemic was probably a great example of that for us on the credit union side of, hey, we went into this pandemic and all of a sudden the world's turned upside down. There were some financial things that we had to do for our members that we had to do very quickly. And I think that was a little bit of foresight into the future for us, that's not going to be a one-time event. We're going to have things that are going to come up to where we need to be reactive to what is happening in the world, what is going on either in the economy, world events, whatever the case may be. So absolutely the ability to deliver change quickly, I think is going to continue to be more and more important as we move forward over the next 5 to 10 years. What I will be interested to see is right now, cloud solutions provide you a lot of that ability to do that. But as everything in IT tends to be cyclical, at what point are we going to start rotating back to wanting to bring everything back in-house again? That it's going to become cost prohibitive, and we've already seen it in some cases with the mad dash to the cloud initially, where all of a sudden it became cost prohibitive, and we suddenly realized, whoa, wait a minute, hey guys, this not everything makes sense in the cloud, and depending on billing structures, it may be far too expensive to do this. We need to bring this back on-prem. I'm curious to see how that develops over the years.
You just made Michael Dell's ears perk up, and you made him smile really big that people are going to come back into the data center. I have to ask, because you said, okay, everything's cyclical. What if we start bringing things back in-house, which Keith and I see? We see customers who are coming back, et cetera. What about blockchain? Blockchain for financial institutions, it's a loaded question. So I'll kind of throw out like, all right, say people are in the cloud now, but we want to go to a more distributed environment than even the cloud is today. So there's come back on-prem and manage it ourselves. There's the cloud, and then there's this whole blockchain thing, which has been we've seen the first kind of boom, and then now we're in a bust right now. And I think a lot of people are speculating like what's going to happen with it. How do you think that affects Sharonview and other financial institutions, and what do you expect to be dealing with the blockchain?
Sure, and it's interesting because I think, again, every new technology, we see the same type of approach. There are the bleeding edges that are the cutting edges that are running to it immediately and saying, hey, this is the wave of the future. And then we find out that it's not. And so then there's a mad dash retreat. And then there's a slow migration to it of understanding, hey, what is the real application for this technology? Where does it make sense? Where doesn't it make sense? Again, we saw that. We've seen it over the years with hardware. We've seen it now with cloud. I think blockchain's the same way. I think there is a place. There's a time and place where it makes sense. Is it a catch-all solution for everybody for all things? I don't think so. But I do think there are some opportunities for it that it does make sense. And I think that's what we'll see. It'll continue to be another cog in the machine that will provide solutions for people, but I don't think it's a catch-all.
Okay, so you heard it here first. Kevin is not suggesting putting all of your future savings into a random altcoin that you have no idea what the application utility is.
Just my feelings.
That's the fair advice. No, we are not financial advisors on the IT Matters podcast, so take nothing we say about the financial predictions with a grain of salt. But Kevin, this has been a great conversation, and we really enjoy having you on. And I think there will be others that would like to have you back on to talk a little bit more specifically on some of these. We leave all of our guests with one final question that we have them answer. And this question is around, if you had a platform and you're standing in front of 10 million people, or you're giving the State of the Union, right? So this is Kevin's State of the Union. You're talking to people of all different backgrounds, et cetera. What is your best advice to them as it relates to technology?
I think it goes back to, and it's our entire conversation today. With technology, it's a wonderful tool, but understand the business. You've got to have an understanding of how to use the technology and involve the people that need to utilize the technology in determining what that technology is. So I think unless you have conversations with people, unless you understand what their needs are, what are their challenges, how can you use technology to assist them, I think it's a recipe for disaster to just throw technology at problems. You have to have those business interactions, understand what your customers, whether it's internal, external, what have you, understand what their needs are, and then start talking technology. But until you understand what they need, keep technology in your back pocket.
I love it. Kevin, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they're following up from the show?
Sure. You can reach out to me via email. That is fine. It's kevin.hughes. That's HUGHES at sharonview.org, SHARONVIEW.org. Please feel free to reach out via email.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes for you folks, and I know Kevin's on LinkedIn as well. Keith, thank you for joining the show. To all our listeners, thank you for joining us. Make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms you listen on. Please share with your friends and family. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day. Kevin, thanks again. It's been our pleasure, and thanks for listening to the IT Matters podcast.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Keith.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks for listening. The IT Matters podcast is produced by Apkalla, an IT advisory firm that helps businesses navigate the vast and complex IT marketplace. Learn more about Apkalla at opkalla.com.